Thank you very much. We seem to be missing Shiva Amati. I know that she might have gotten stuck at her own opening, which was tonight. She did promise to come, but with that, would the speakers please then come to the front and we can, any questions that the group has for them or any questions we want to pose, they can answer together or have discourse. I certainly have some questions for them, and I'm sure other members of our group who've been here tonight probably also do as well. Do you want to come up, David, as yourself or as Martha? Um, so, are there any questions initially, or should I start? Ah, there. We have a whole catacomb of questions over here. I know they're dark in the back there.
Hi, this one's actually David. This one's for you.
There's two
Um,
This guy.
the first one, yes, Goldstein.
Purple David.
Yes. So you mentioned people were being conned. Um, I kind of have concerns about that, but that's not even my point. What if they didn't care that they were being conned? Number one, and as far as you mentioned something about emotional need, what if that was the emotion that they were seeking from jump anyway? In regards to him being elected, because me personally, I voted for Sanders and Hillary, but I always felt like he was going to get elected regardless. So what if they were motivated by something other than being conned?
So I just want to speak to that really fast. I've been working very closely with LGBTQ activists, Hispanic activists, African American activists, feminist activists, Jewish activists, Muslim activists, and when I talk about listening to Trump voters, one of the things that always gets brought up is why the fuck won't they listen to me? Why do I have to justify my humanity in the first place to these people who don't seem to care about what happens to me? I think there is a powerful sentiment among the left that you know, they elected a guy who's willing to kill us simply to further his power, and they don't care. And maybe, like you said, that's the reason why they voted for him. I don't have a good response to that right now. I just don't. All I know is the examples of people like Martin Luther King, of Gandhi, of Jesus Christ himself, of continually reaching out, of never seeing anybody as the enemy. Somebody who I've been inspired by is an African American gentleman who goes out and directly talks to people wearing the hoods of the Ku Klux Klan, and just to get to know them. And he now has a collection of KKK members who have given them their hoods and said they're giving up because of the conversations they've had with him. So I know there's some kind of humanity at its core. I'm a Buddhist myself, so I believe there's something pure and beautiful down deep, no matter how awful there is. And if we can just find our way to that, something can happen. So I don't want to say, like, I know exactly why 40, I can't remember the number now, 46 million or 60 million people pulled the lever for him. All I know is that he lied about absolutely everything, and you know, some part of that was believed, and that to me is a con, and that to me sets up that something. So our way around that, if we seek to, and if we believe that's the best way forward, is speaking to the reason why they were set up to be conned in the first place. And that's just at the end of the day, man, that's just how I feel.
All right, thank you. I actually have a second question, if you don't mind, for Jonathan, because I kind of share the same sentiment you do. Honestly, just for me being a black man in America, and that's just the honest truth. But at the same time, everybody's an artist here, and I always see an artist as an entrepreneur. Do you see in any way, shape, or form taking that same spirit you put in that Instagram page and showing others how to do it in a way that it can help build what you're trying to build on, versus like all of us here in this room do you see any way, shape, or form that being even possible to build a platform that this doesn't happen again ever? I'm just saying that. Actually, I have a second part to that. I'm just saying that because I'm an artist myself, and I try to curate that. I work out of this a think tank called the Impact Hub, and I take youth from neighborhoods I grew up in, and I'm showing them how to be graphic artists and how to use that to voice what they have going on inside. So I want to know if you have that trend of thought as well.
Um, well, social media is of course so. Oh, hello. Is this on?
Hello.
Social media is of course accessible to everyone. It's and you know, as I said, I have like no experience with it myself. It's just I had the motivation to just try to get as many counter-Trump images out into the world and just see what would happen. And I don't really know what will happen, um, but yeah. So I don't know. That's not much of an answer.
Work? Hi. Yes. Hi, my name is Yasham. I'm also actually part of the coalition, thanks to Mitra. So mine is, let's say, more of a comment slash question, and would like to leave it open to you guys to respond freely. Uh, what I wanted to say mostly, it's linked to what was mentioned before, is the element of emotion within the whole situation. Also, me coming from Europe, from the nation that gave you the first lady now. But that's something, that's the humor part of it all. We can go to it later on. So, but what I was noticing, and not only noticing, what we lived through in Slovenia, in Italy, I lived in Italy with the rise of Berlusconi and so on and so forth, was that when left, especially in Europe, linked to more experience of a socialism, not just being liberal, but an idea of a different sort of a political system that gives also different reason why to stick together as a community, as a nation. That was, of course, based on an emotion of opposing somebody, and that kind of it ended. That passion went away. And of course, the ones on the other side, if we have to say and talk us and them, which I think is already problematic, they had a passion rising up, and this is what we are facing now. So, because in a way, I think what killed the left is cynicism, and it's cynicism towards the emotion of not only the other one, but your own. I think also, especially in the community of art, talking about emotion is sort of a more a rare thing than a rule. At the end of the day, art is about expressing the emotion and giving it some sort of a form. I would also like to add that if you think of, I don't know, fitting 100 artists into a room and asking them to come up with a new rule, a new idea for the world, nothing will come out of that room but just arguing. And that's the advantage of art, absolutely, and that's how it should stay, because the more, and maybe going to what Marta said, the louder we are, the more diverse we are in colors, in saying, in shouting, singing, and especially not just using the same format, but not neglecting the emotion, because that's what came out. It's okay to be angry. I'm hurt for the fact that I can finally just trust the emotion. It's too hard to participate in something where I can always have to analyze, understand. Somebody comes and say, "You're angry," that's enough. Okay? And I think basically the problem is I think that that's more than clear now that that was neglected, and that's what the others knew and had no shame of using that or using as a manipulation at the end. And that's what happened in Italy with Berlusconi. That's what happened in Slovenia with the far right government, which was actually overthrown by resistance of protests. I mean, that had to be a legal reason at the end, but what made it come to that is there was so much pressure on the opposition because there were constantly protests and protests and protests that something had to be done, and it was. So, but yeah, no, don't blame us for Melania.
Does anyone want to comment on that up here? No?
Hello? Okay. That was a great comment. That was really on point. I feel like that's what a lot of us are feeling right now. I know that that's what I'm feeling is, the right has been winning on fear and emotion and hatred and really strong emotions, honestly, a lot of which are negative. And I think there is a reticence both in the left, in the intellectual communities, and in the artistic communities to engage with that. There's that whole phrase that Michelle Obama says, when they go low, we go high, which I appreciate and I respect. But it's interesting because that also seems like it's problematic in some ways for me because it's just like sometimes you also have to fight with the tools that they're fighting with. You know what I mean? And I think a big question for me in terms of emotion is also energy. How can we keep our emotions, our energy active and expressed so that we don't fall into a hole of cynicism and depression, basically, where a lot of us are easily and quickly slipping in and out of. I feel like almost on a daily basis, every time I open up the news in the morning, I'm like, ugh. And then I'm just like, okay, let's go about the day, So, and I feel like there's a couple of things. I think for me, strategies have been self-care, which I'm really bad at and I don't do. So I'm just like saying it and not doing it as much as I should. But in terms of spreading our energy out over a duration so that we don't get up in arms every day and then express all of our emotion and we have none left like 2 months down the road. So I think there's a thing about self-care in terms of duration of energy and emotion. And I think we're also a lot of really talented people in terms of image making, and expression. And I personally feel like if we bind together and use our skill sets that we have and sort of work together on what are the skills that we have through more workshops like this and try and keep that emotion in a place where when we come together we can express it in a big way, whether that's through a media campaign we create of our own, whether that's through art projects that are public, etc., whether that's through protest in the streets, as you mentioned. I personally think that, I don't know, I'm interested in keeping that emotion open, and in a forum like this where we have an opportunity to continue meeting, I think to keep that question on the table, because that's not something that's going to go away or something that's easily solved. At least I think on my part there is no answer per se, but I think it's something really good to keep in mind. I don't know if that answered anything, but do you guys have anything you want to say? I mean, I'm a total cynic, so don't get me wrong. Like, I'm with you, we're fucked or whatever in a lot of ways. But I also think that we have to live under the guise that, like, unless we bind together and keep our energy and our emotion moving and expressed and continue having these catharsis, whether creative or personal or interpersonal, we just have to survive. We're in that kind of survive mentality. We have to do that to keep surviving, or at least I do. Oh, thanks. Thank you. It's just true.
Hi. First of all, Amy, thank you for running for office.
Oh, thank you.
Um,
Let's
and-
all run for office.
Yeah.
Why not?
Um,
In our own districts, it'd be amazing.
yeah, exactly. And also, I would
Yeah.
like to encourage you when you're
I'm like-
to go to Scranton and Peoria and fail.
Yes, totally.
I mean, and do it at 100 miles an hour.
Totally.
You know, and if somebody says, "What is this piece of junk?" You're trying to say, "Well, thanks for your opinion, and are you registered to vote?" I mean, you know what? Something.
Yeah,
So,
totally.
good for you. Don't go fail.
Yes.
Um,
I'm ready.
there's a couple of things I would like if you guys would respond a little bit more to these ideas that you brought up about direct action in with artists, because my sort of overall comment is I think it's really important for whatever kind of artist you are, whether you're a writer or a visual artist or a musician, to bring that to the table. I mean, what is the most enduring image of Obama's presidency? It was by a muralist. It wasn't by a marketing person or somebody, you know, doing it. It was by a real artist. And that was, you know, that's a real contribution. And so those things, you say, well, can, you know, art change and have a political effect? Yes, it can. So I would, you know, I always encourage is, you know, bring it to the table. And also, I think it's really important for artists to be involved in electoral, like running for school boards, because the first thing they cut is arts and languages, and it'll be the last thing they're cutting. Those types of direct participation and in engaging with youth. I mean, I think whatever coalitions or groups that are formed, the questions do need to be asked. Are you willing to be arrested? Are you willing to walk home a kid from school, volunteer in your neighborhood, so that ICE following them, you know, I mean, you as an artist, are we, you know, raise your hand, are we willing to participate in all of that? Or are you willing to take that kid and teach him to draw, or teach him to write? Hey, write us a story, et cetera, et cetera. We're talking about stories. So just, you know, any sort of more real direct thing like that, I think, is really important, and just any and all comments, and especially because I know there's this, you mentioned the Summer of Hope, but the National Endowment for the Arts may not wait that long. It may be the Summer of Despair. I mean, they're going to cut that. So again, that's a huge thing that I think, you know, from Bruce Springsteen on down, it's a real thing for the artistic community to be very vocal about. And if you would like to speak to what...
Well, I just want to say something on behalf of the coalition, because that's something that we discussed there. And the gentleman you're speaking about, the muralist or street artist, however you want to put him, Shepard Fairey, who did the Hope poster. The individual who actually spearheaded that from the White House's communication office is a gentleman named Yossi Sargent, who wanted to be here as well tonight.
Oh, great.
But he lives in Los Angeles, and he was in New York at the wrong week, as he puts it. But we have been speaking to him at length, because he also works with a number of other organizations, including the Democratic Convention, where they did a large exhibition in Philadelphia during the convention. And, you know, one of the things that, you know, one of the interesting questions that we have is about that kind of the micro actions as well as the macro actions, and, you know, how to engage on that level. And a lot of these smaller things like poster making seminars
Exactly.
become a way of collaborating between direct action and artistic practice.
And for your local candidates directly, I mean, bring the artists in to make your posters, and because they're always better. I mean,
But just to plug something, Yossi, when we know more about it, we'll tell you more about it. He will be doing something at PS1 that is a poster making project that we're collaborating with him on. But also, one of the first conversations that Thomas, who's in the front row, and I had with Yossi, which was specifically that artists always come out in the favor of causes, but rarely come out in favor of the arts. In other words, you get artists to come out in like a CREA, for example, which is, if you don't know, an AIDS advocacy organization which started here in New York, or other causes, but very rarely will they say, do not defund the NEA. So that was one of the first things that was one of Yossi's concerns, is that artists also have to advocate for themselves.
Exactly,
And
yeah.
as we know, at Wellesley, they did during A Day Without an Immigrant, they took down all of the paintings which were done by immigrants. And MoMA very poignantly also a few weeks ago, took several of their canonical, I will say, with some hesitation, artists out of the display for the permanent collection and put in Middle Eastern and Iranian artists, specifically 4 of the 7 were from Iran, artists that are in their permanent collection, including, I could go down the list of them, it wouldn't matter, but including also Iraqi artists like Zaha Hadid, her very early paintings, and put them in the permanent collection to say we also represent these people. And so, on an institutional level, at least they are making a step in that direction.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I just think it's, when the question that you had, and one of the things that drew me to this was when you were saying, where and, when should art be there? And, my answer is like with Amy's, it's like everywhere and all the time. I mean, you can use the words insurrectionist, guerrilla artist, intervention, whatever it is, but
We were called a guerrilla art group in one of the press pieces. I thought it was very
well,
funny.
yeah, but it's all. I hope that when that damn wall starts to go up, that there's a concert out there and there's masses and it's the whole thing spray painted from one end to the other and holes are being dug. I mean, the whole thing. So, that kind of. So anyway, I just wanted to, and also to David, just. My grandpa was a coal miner in Appalachia, and all these sort of mystical things that the Democratic establishment and Howard Dean ever don't seem to have the answers for. I've known the answers for a long time, so if you want to talk afterwards, I'm more than happy to. In fact, I took direct action today and wrote the DNCC, and I couldn't take it anymore. My first sentence is, "What the fuck is wrong with you all?" So, anyway.
Very legit. So I just personally would be very remiss in not bringing this book up to everybody's attention. It was written by the gentleman and group behind Otpor, ATPOR. It was an artist collective in Serbia that overthrew one of the bloodiest, most vicious dictators in European history, Slobodan Milosevic. They've written a guidebook. They are training activists all over the world and have been successfully. A radio station, right.
It all started with a radio station opposing a dictatorship with culture.
Yes.
It was based not on political art, but on art being done with a political thought, which means that I still am free in my mind. That's why I play punk music. I come up with new concerts. I come up with new music, and I give that to the people. Right. And I give them, yeah. And I think also, sorry, I think I just jumped in between. I think what is also very important is that it's not necessarily political art in order to be influential. I think also you putting up that book, there's another very important book by Stefan Hessel, Time for Outrage, which was the basis for all the uprising in Europe. And I think one of the basic things he was advocating was to create is to resist, and to resist is to create. Sorry.
Okay, I think we'll take 2 more questions. There was a.
I just
Oh,
wanted to
okay.
add something, because for me it's almost like the most important thing besides resistance and everything is about being human, and then once you tap into your humanity, you tap into all your other skills, and with your humanity and intention to be human and to just connect and just first of all be alive and human yourself. Then just with that you radiate out, you create bridges, and you don't see anybody as number one too different, too foreign, too unbridgeable, too unattainable as an enemy. And that's where in your core of your humanity is where your strength is, and your message becomes stronger, and then you unify. So we can learn from Trump and his manipulative techniques and utilize them, but have them be colored by humanity, because we can come to the same result, apparently behaving the same as him, confident and embracing, but just coming from a better place. I mean, not from wanting to manipulate and seduce, but rather to open up and engage.
Yes. And I think also, David, your comment about listening strategies. Yeah, I have the mic. But yeah, listening strategies. Like, to piggyback on what you're saying, become human and humanize and listen. Yeah, and listening. I think that's the other piece of that cross-cultural dialogue. Also, the title of that book, I don't know if you said it.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Blueprint for Revolution.
Blueprint for Revolution.
His last name is Popovich. I'm not going to try on the first name. But this is the single best book on general resistance and written, executed by artists. All right? So it is just, to me, it's almost my Bible these days.
Amy, I was wondering if you could repeat the quote by Hugo Ball that inspires you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So again, quoting about his Cabaret Voltaire, and I'll just say one quick thing about Cabaret Voltaire that I love. It was a space in Zurich that Hugo Ball started for artists and intellectuals in the avant-garde to come together, sort of as we're coming together tonight, to discuss politics and creativity, and also to use vaudevillian techniques of performance, so bringing in the low with the high and thinking about that, like the high and the low combining and using those strategies to also reach other communities potentially. So that's another thing about Cabaret Voltaire. He says Cabaret Voltaire's intention is to, quote, to remind the world that there are people of independent minds beyond war and nationalism who live for different ideals. Again, just bringing it in, I think, when you think about that from 1916, what we're dealing with now, and then you're thinking in terms of history, this is not that new. You know what I mean? So we can get through it. Exactly.
I think this.
And we're at war. You know, that's the thing. We're at war. We don't feel it on our home turf right now, but we're at so many wars right now. It's out of control. Iraq, you know, like some of these places that we think it's over, Afghanistan, you know. Anyway.
Well, first of all, I, from personal experience, will say that protest works. I'm from the Vietnam generation, and I grew up in what you would consider, it's not on? Okay, there we go.
Yes.
Thank you. The civil disobedience works. It helped end the Vietnam War. And from my personal experience, one of the things I remember from being a freshman in college when the marches first really started was one of the biggest mistakes we made was to not be inclusive in building the movement. There was, to begin with, really anti-feelings towards veterans. Now, I grew up in a very liberal, educated family, but I spent 19 years overseas on U.S. military bases teaching drawing to people returning from the wars. And it changed them and it changed me. And what we can do in our civil disobedience is to enlarge our group, to have empathy for people for different reasons that might have left the left. people who thought the left were gullible to, what did you call it? Emotional cons, right? It's not on one side, it's not on the other, it's on all political sides. So if we want to be successful, we need to be empathetic to people from different backgrounds that you might have thought were your enemy that will join you and make a really inclusive, empathetic society.
I think that's a really important point. I think also after the 2003 invasion of Iraq, there was a real sense of disillusionment that I think set in. There were huge protests, 1 million people on the streets of London, around the United States, around the world. And I've heard a lot of people say post-Trump, you know, look at what that did. They still invaded. It changed nothing. But you're absolutely right. The history of political agitation, I mean, from Vietnam to the Prague Spring, people on the streets always makes a difference. It's the one thing that governments are really afraid of. I think your other point was also really good about attempts to try and splinter solidarity. We're seeing at the moment huge attempts to try to separate out the concerns of the so-called left behind white working class communities in America and working class communities of color, when in fact a lot of their economic struggles are completely aligned. And the one kind of coup, the real coup of the right wing is to get the left, is to get the working class to vote against its own economic interest through these ideological struggles, through, you know, gods, gays, and guns, and this kind of bullshit. So it's really important that people stay in solidarity with each other across all those lines. And then I think the last thing that's come up numerous times this evening is humor, which reminded me of a line, an interview with Bell Hooks quite recently, where she said, whenever the left has tried to move forward in a radical way without humor, it's failed. And I think that's very true.
I think it's really true. And also, just to piggyback on that, we saw that the protests at JFK and around the Muslim ban across the world and in the US helped with that temporary stay leading to the actual court ruling that it was unconstitutional. That was the ACLU in conjunction with people protesting. So we've already seen in this administration that that can happen, even though it came back, but we can fight it again.
So this is our final question comment.
Thanks. Hi. So thank you all. This has been amazing. I'm a bit concerned. I used to be a historian in a previous life, and I'm not an artist, by the way. I'm just a collector. But I'm deeply concerned about this and want to do whatever I can. I'm also very concerned from a historical point of view of the focus on Trump as the locus of all of this, because can you guys speak to how we can also, or what might be being done to focus on the fact that there is a Republican administration that is absolutely supporting this. You know, obviously it's careerism, but all of their dump Trump and never Trump movement, that died as soon as they realized that he was going to give them power. And I think by just focusing on Trump, we weaken our movement. And so I'm wondering if you guys have ideas about, or if there are things going on to really remember to, I mean, of course Trump is a fabulous target, but how can we more focus on the fact that there is a Republican administration who's been willing to abandon all their principles and capitalize on this?
So I'll start. So that's a great point, and there's been a lot of discussion about Trump's enablers, which is definitely the leadership of the GOP, a lot of rank and file, a lot of the people around it. So when I was speaking to that chief of staff for the U.S. senator, and I was asking him like, so what's working, what's not, what aren't we thinking of? He was like, why the fuck aren't you going after these guys' donors? He was like, if there's one thing Paul Ryan or Mitch McConnell cannot stand, it's an angry phone call from one of their top donors. All their top donors have business interests in their states, within their districts. They are just as susceptible to PR, boycotts, all of the rest of that. He's like, yeah, you can't move to Kentucky and vote against McConnell until like 2018 or 2020, but you can set up a boycott or a PR, some kind of public display against one of his big donors. And yeah. Yeah. And that donor is going to call McConnell and piss in his ear. And McConnell's going to seek to do it. So, there's, and, on top of that, there's all these CEOs from major corporations who are working with Trump. I know one of them, Fortune 50, where I have a friend, she's like, half the company's ready to tear this guy's head off. And he has to keep a constant internal blog saying why he's doing this. She's like, I don't know why no one's boycotting us. Slight bit of bad publicity, and he'll back right the fuck off and run away screaming. It's all of them.
In New York City, think of who's funding the arts, the major arts institutions in New York City.
Right.
Right? The Koch brothers.
Right. So
that is a major contradiction.
Right.
That we have to
Koch
face
Plaza.
and that we don't face.
Right.
And so it's very nice for MoMA to change, some of their paintings up. But I mean, let's look at the reality here. Right? Who funds the art world in New York City?
Right.
Did they back Trump? They are Alec. They are everything.
Coke Plaza. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a big issue for a lot of artists and arts organizations, honestly, because, when you look at the financial capital of the U.S., we're not that far away. It's Wall Street. And a lot of those people are Trump supporters, and a lot of those people sit on boards of a lot of the major arts institutions and granting bodies that give artists money. So it is a really tricky landscape. And I like what you're saying about, those are the people that we need to get their ear. We need to bend their ear to try and make these waves of change, because they're the ones that are backing, I agree.
So the corporation with the CEO who's working with Trump and who's in danger of his own people, it might rhyme with Johnson & Johnson.
Just might. Okay, well, I want to thank you all for coming. I think that it's been a very fruitful discussion for all of us. I want to remind you that we do have a website, which is www.handsofourrevolution.com. That if you're not signed up, there is an engage button. That we call it the button at the end. That's what we called it. But it's a field where you can obviously put in your views and your email, and we will keep in touch with you. I want to thank FIT for hosting us, Mitra, Thomas, and Jenna, who are also part of the organizing committee here tonight and have been extremely helpful, as well as David, Jonathan, and Amy for lending their voices. And certainly one of the things that, I think one of the next topics that we are going to take on in our next workshop is precisely that question of, who is this art world, and is it, and who are the people that are the targets that we go after to change the rhetoric, to change the conversation. And I know it's something that, Jonathan and I had spoken about before, that, the art world is not just one thing. It is many things, and the plurality is a strength, but it can also be, a source of consternation sometimes, and that's something to flesh out in the future. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thanks to Mitra also. She did a lot of work too.